So I just want to do a quick piece about one of the aspects of Warhammer 40K, and that is allies. Now, allies are kind of new to newer players with the birth of 6th edition, but from what I understand, and I really only started playing in early 5th edition, before 5th edition, there were allies in the past. They weren't quite handled the same way that these guys are, but it's a new thing, and I want to talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of allies. So what are allies? Normally, in a game of 40K, you have your primary detachment. If it's Necrons, it's because you're playing Necrons. If it's Grey Knights, it's because you're playing Grey Knights. It's whatever codex you usually start with. And as a new player, you usually start with one army, and then you build up and you paint and you do all that stuff, and you learn about that one army. In their infinite wisdom, Games Workshop recently, which is to say about 2 summers ago, when they first released 6th edition, they came out and said, okay, look, there's this new thing, it's called allies. Now, why'd they do that? There's a couple of reasons. Financially, it's pretty brilliant. We gamers, miniatures gamers, as a group, have a little bit of a, let's say it's an attention deficit. So we have a tendency to be interested in this army, and then something else comes out that's new, and then we're very interested in that army, and then we can kind of hop around and do things like that. But to a lot of players, they've been putting all their time and money into this one army, but they're kind of interested in this army over here, but they just don't want to go with 2 armies. They don't want to do that. Along come allies. So now you can have your main army, but you can also kind of build a little bit of it's just a little detachment. It's an ally detachment, and now I have some of these guys, and they can fight with these guys and work together, and I can kind of get some synergy going, plus I get to paint different guys. I'm not having to paint everybody blue or silver or whatever the color you're doing for your current army. I can do some different stuff, and that's kind of a neat thing. The downside, of course, is that once they get you into, well, I just need an HQ unit and a troop and maybe a fast attack, and then I'll have my allies done. Eventually you're going to say, well, I could try out the heavy support. I could do one of those guys in this group, and then I could do and then eventually now you have 2 armies. So financially it's a brilliant idea, because the people who are like on the bubble can now jump into it, and there's a good chance that they'll go further, and then they'll end up with 2 armies. Or people who are on the bubble about, I love doing this, but I'd like to try out some other armies, can now do that. Now, not every army can ally with every other army. There's a matrix in the big main book that shows that this army, and then this column, and then you go over here, and then it gives different colors. There are armies that are considered to be battle brothers, which means that they are total bros, and they are absolutely, there's no downside to those 2 guys being allies, those 2 armies. There are also allies of convenience. Allies of convenience are, there are some limitations. Like they can't, like your independent character can't go over to the ally group and join up with one of their people, and there's some stuff about, some of the psychic abilities don't transfer and things like that. That's what allies of convenience can do. Then you get into desperate allies. These are guys who can still be allies, but they just don't quite trust each other. And there's a special rule that if, beginning I think of a turn, if you have your ally group within, I think, 6 inches of one of your primary detachment units, you have to roll a die. And on a certain roll, this group of primaries that the allies are hanging out near won't do anything any at all during the turn, because they're just trying to keep eyes on those guys that they're desperate allies with, because they don't trust them. So there's that. Lastly, there's, I think, a category called Come the Apocalypse, which means over my dead body, basically. Those guys can never be allies. Come the Apocalypse is basically the entire matrix for the Tyranids. The Tyranids have no friends. This is mainly because they are bugs that want to eat everything. It's very difficult to be friendly with bugs that want to eat everything. So Tyranid players are bummed out because they can't ally, but it would be really weird if bugs that wanted to eat everything were on your side. It just doesn't make any sense. Beyond that, nearly everybody has got some sort of ally that they can work with. Some of them are limited. Chaos Demons don't make a lot of friends, but they can hang out with Chaos Space Marines. They seem to be okay with each other. On the other hand, you have people like the Tau. They'll basically work for anybody. I want to say that the Imperial Guard, kind of the same thing. They're very friendly with nearly anybody. And then the Orcs, they're kind of mercenary. They'll go wherever there's a fight. So the upside of I've got this ability now to modify my, play style. You can say, well, I'm going to throw some Orcs in there for some close combat, and they're just going to run across, and it's going to be awesome, and I'll be able to model them and paint them, and it's a lot of fun. That's a bonus. Here comes a con. The con is that you can do things with these ally groups now. It does give you more possibilities, and it gives you a little more flexibility, but it also causes things like we saw last year at Adepticon 2013, where we had a whole bunch of people running Grey Knights and Necrons. Now, they are technically allies, according to the list, the matrix in the book, but it just seems weird that they would work together. It doesn't really follow fluff a heck of a lot, but there was a lot of people that were running Grey Knights allied with Necrons, or Necrons allied with Grey Knights, and I wonder, why is that? As it turned out, it was because the combination was a little broken. So people kind of, especially at big tournaments, gravitate towards the stuff that's broken, and then because Games Workshop doesn't really play test anything anymore, you see these things kind of crop up at tournaments. So that's a downside to the allies. What do I think about the allies? That's obviously what you've all come here to find out. Well, I personally kind of like it because it gives me more options. Because I think the models are awesome, I have made a small Grey Knights force to attach to my Space Marines. Just because I could build like 8 Terminators, make one of them a Justicar, one of them a Inquisitor, all in Terminator armor, and then the regular Terminators. Those models are amazing. They just have so much, like etching and all kinds of crazy work. If you look at the models for Grey Knights, they just look astounding. And so I was like, I really want these guys, but I don't want to start a whole Grey Knights army. So I put some together, and I made it happen. And so that's a kind of a cool thing. It kind of allows you to scratch your modeling and painting itch if you want to get into that. So that's something that in my mind is cool. And it's obviously a smart, plan for our friends at Games Workshop. So, it makes sense that they want to do it that way. Otherwise, I don't see myself running a lot of allies. I eventually might try to make some Traitor Guard if I ever do go back to my Chaos Space Marines. We'll see. That's one of the nice things about the Guard, is that they can basically work with nearly anybody. There's a couple of people that they're just kind of like, no, that's too weird, we're not going to work for those folks. But, again, for Chaos, you can use those guys and just kind of, it gives you all these cool opportunities to kind of paint them up to look like Traitor Guard. Like they used to be Guard, and they've flipped over to Chaos, and their skin's all pale, and maybe they've got spikes coming out of their helmet, or all kinds of cool crap like that. And it's just something that's sort of a neat, as a person who's kind of a fluff gamer, it gives you all kinds of cool possibilities for that kind of stuff. But I got to say, in this current landscape, I'm really glad I'm not a tournament player, because the allies, amongst all the other things that Games Workshop has added in the last 12 months, is making tournament play very difficult. I'm really glad I'm not a tournament organizer, because with allies, Escalation, that book, the Stronghold Assault, that book, now all these data slates, extra supplemental codices like the Inquisitorial one, these new Imperial Titans, all this stuff that's been added recently, because Games Workshop's opinion right now is they just want to make rules so that you'll just keep buying models. And they don't care about organized play. They don't care about tournaments and what's, balanced or anything like that. It's their prerogative. And it's tournament organizers' prerogative to just be able to go in and sit down and say, you know what, we're not going to allow this, and we're going to change this, and these are the rules that we're putting out for our tournament. Play them or don't. If you don't like them, don't come to our tournament. I think that's totally fine. I hear things from time to time about people talking at local shops, like, well, I don't think that we should have any allies at pickup games. I think that shouldn't be allowed here at the store. Well, It depends on who you're going to play with. But something like allies, I kind of draw the line and I say allies, I think, should be something that's allowed in pickup play at the shops. Tournament organizers, it's totally up to them. But for me, I'm totally fine with allies. I'm totally fine with flyers. I'm a little less fine with escalation and all the super heavies you can bring. I kind of don't want to play against that. I kind of don't want to play against, the giant fortifications that you can get in Stronghold Assault. I haven't really gone up against too many of the data slates, so I can't say much about that. But allies, I think, are, for me at least, not being a tournament guy, a pretty welcome addition in 6th edition, just because I love the concept of being able to just, and it's part of the ADD that we gamers have, I just love the concept of being able to work on something else. Not a ton, I don't have to start a new army. I can just build a group of guys, and I can make it happen, and paint them, and that scratches my itch.